Wunderbar, super, herzlich willkommen. Dann vielleicht ganz kurz zu Bitcoin Austria, für die, die zum ersten Mal da sind. Wir sind ein Verein, eine Non-Profit-Organisation, die sich schon seit 2011 mit dem Thema Bitcoin beschäftigt. Damals gab es auch noch keine Altcoins, also die Auswahl war damals auf Bitcoin beschränkt. Wir haben einfach das Ziel, dass wir über Bitcoin und die Möglichkeiten, die da dahinter stecken, uneigennützig informieren. Wir verkaufen auch nichts, es gibt bei uns keine Bitcoins zu kaufen. Ja, wir verkaufen keine Bitcoin. Wir erzählen nur darüber, was man damit alles machen kann und wie man es verwenden kann. Heute ist das Thema eigentlich gar nicht Bitcoin, sondern Libra, der Libra-Coin von Facebook. Daniel Bichler wird uns dann da Näheres dazu erzählen und auch ein bisschen den Vergleich, Unterschied zu Bitcoin, der wird Sie zeigen.
Genau, also ein bisschen für die Leute, die es noch gar nicht kennen, vielleicht ein bisschen der Vergleich und auch ein bisschen die Ansichten, die Bitcoin in dem ganzen Bereich haben zu dieser Entwicklung.
Und weiß nicht, wer hätte es denn gerne auf Englisch? Anybody who would like the presentation in English? English talk? Okay, we will do it in English. Okay? Trotzdem kurz davor noch, nachdem es noch neue Leute gibt. Wie starte ich mit Bitcoin? Wie kommt man überhaupt rein? Dazu habe ich heute 2 Minuten der Anita Bosch zur Verfügung, stehen mir zur Verfügung. Sie hat ein paar gute Tipps, wie man loslegen könnte und ein paar andere Informationen. Bitte.
Danke Johannes. Hallo, ich bin die Anita Bosch. Ich habe, glaube ich, 65. oder 67. Meetup oder so hier gestaltet mit einem Vortrag über Bitcoin, also einen kleinen Vortrag über, was ist Bitcoin überhaupt und wie funktioniert das. Für Neueinsteiger, die es interessiert, ich habe einen Ratgeber geschrieben über Bitcoin, also wo kann ich es kaufen, wie halte ich sicher, welche Wallet verwende ich etc. Und wenn man sich zuerst mal nur ein bisschen was anhören möchte, ich bin auch Gastgeberin eines Podcasts, der heißt auch Bitcoin und Co. Da gibt es großteils englischsprachige Folgen, aber auch jetzt mittlerweile ein paar deutschsprachige Folgen, unter anderem auch mit Andreas Antonopoulos, der vielleicht dem einen oder der anderen ein Begriff ist, und mit anderen bekannten Bitcoinern bzw. Developern, die an Bitcoin mitentwickeln. Und was vielleicht auch ganz interessant ist, Andreas hat ja das Buch The Internet of Money geschrieben, das sind 2 Teile. Und die werden eigentlich von den meisten Leuten so als die Einstiegslektüre bezeichnet, weil sie total untechnisch sind und aber einen guten Überblick darüber geben, wofür Bitcoin eigentlich gut ist und was der Sinn des Ganzen ist. Und diese beiden Bände gibt es jetzt auch auf Deutsch als das Internet des Geldes, die kann man auf Amazon beziehen und meine Wenigkeit hat einen Teil davon übersetzt. Und ja, das war es im Wesentlichen.
Bitcoin-Podcast finde ich wie?
Auf Spotify, auf iTunes, auf Google Podcast, also auf allen großen Podcast-Playern am besten nach Anita Bosch suchen, weil wenn man nach Bitcoin und Co. sucht, kommt viel.
Okay,
danke.
Besten Dank. Gut, und damit sind wir auch schon beim Facebook-Coin. Daniel, bitte.
Okay, so if it's okay for everybody, I can switch to English. Yes? Yeah. Okay, cool. So today we have a kind of strange meetup because usually we don't talk about any other coins. But that's the question, like, is this like any other coin there is in the ecosystem? So we thought of making one meetup, discussing kind of the facts, so what they announced, what's the idea behind it, then discussing what they technically want to do or what they have already done, and at the end discussing also like what's the Bitcoiners' opinion, so to say, on this whole development, what are the thoughts of people in the ecosystem, and yeah, what do we think about it? So yeah, basically I already mentioned that why we have a special Libra meetup. It's not only because it's the first stablecoin, there have been stablecoins around, but I guess one of the first corporate currencies in a way that's not just a stablecoin and not from a non-crypto, it's not from a crypto-native company. It got a lot of regulation coming our way as well. So it's being, or the whole Facebook and Libra organization is being audited basically in the Senate in the US. because of their plans. Also, they have a lot of interesting partners and a lot of interesting choices of partners, and the impact might be pretty big, potentially. So yeah, I mentioned it already. Also at the end, if we can make it run, we already tried out the testnet. There's already a working testnet, so if you want to stick around afterwards, then we can also try some test transactions. One, two small things. We probably make 2 breaks in between, so you can always buy beer in the breaks or go to the toilet, so there's no stress in between. If I do something completely wrong and there are technical people here, raise your hand and correct me. That's okay. So, like a short glossary, I came up with doing that because I was confused myself at one point. There are a lot of different new things that you can hear about this coin. One is there's Libra Core, which is basically the technical implementation of Libra Coin. It's open source, you can already check it out. Then there's Libra Coin, which is basically the currency itself that's invented by this whole conglomerate. Then the conglomerate attached to that is the Libra Association. It's basically a bunch of companies that create and validate transactions in Libra Coin. Then there's Move. Move is basically a virtual machine that's running in Libra Coin. If you don't know what that means, it's not so tragic. A virtual machine in this case basically executes smart contracts. Who does not know what a smart contract is? Who has never heard of that? Don't be shy, Patrick. So on a very basic idea, smart contracts got introduced in with Ethereum mostly, and have these properties that you can't only do a transaction from A to B, but you can also make it dependent on some code. So basically you can add code to a transaction that executes if the code is valid, and can basically do anything with the currency. And then there's Calibra, which is again another thing. It's basically the company that Facebook founded. So Facebook is not in the Libra Association, but Calibra is in the association. Maybe an interesting detail, but if you read any of the slides, maybe then you know what they are talking about. So what is the idea here? Basically what they say or how they communicate is that they say, we believe the world needs a global digital native currency. That sounds very much like what some Bitcoiners might say. And it's basically their mantra, which starts also off in one of the white papers. They have a pretty clear goal. They want a stable currency on a secure and stable open source blockchain backed by a reserve of real assets, which we will talk about, and governed by an independent association, which we'll definitely also talk about. On 18th of June, I hope I got the date correct, they released 4 white papers, so if you want to read them afterwards, be my guest, I made some notes. They already released that on this day, this kind of Libra Core implementation. So don't expect anything fancy, it's basically a command line tool which doesn't look very cool. We can still show it to you at the end. So you can first do testnet transactions. Okay, I think one of the important aspects of this whole thing is the monetary aspects and the kind of incentives that work with that. So what Libra, I have to stop saying Facebook, what the Libra Association wants to do is basically peg the currency to a real basket of world assets, that's what they call it. That basically means that when you pay €1 to get Libra, they will take that euro and invest it into a basket of assets, which are these treasury notes from governments or like very safe bonds or shares of companies. So they basically have a reserve of something on the back end, and if you want to give the Libra coin back, they will give you back the value that this kind of held. That also means that if you're in Venezuela, for example, it could still be a measure for you to keep a kind of more stable rate of a currency, because you won't get back exactly what you paid in, you will get back what this bag of assets is worth now. So it could be also more stable than the local government currency. This money is held in the Libra Reserve, which I just wanted to point out because it sounds very much like the Federal Reserve. There is going to be a competitive network of exchanges. So basically there will be a lot of places where you can buy and sell Libra, which is, for example, the difference to Theta, which you can really give back, which is another stable coin for people who don't know. And it makes this whole kind of thing unique, because all stable coins we've seen so far, and so I'm also getting away from calling it a stable coin, basically had this idea of we take $1 and give you back $1 at the end, maybe. This is different. So they say we don't want to hold dollars, or we don't want to hold euros. We want to hold this kind of bag of assets, which is already kind of maybe shows what you want to do with it, and that it might compete with what we see as traditional fiat currencies. Then there are some interesting quotes in white paper on that also. Interest on the reserve will be used to cover the cost of the system and ensure for transaction fees and pay dividends to investors. So while they are a non-profit organization, they will pay dividends to their investors based on if this bag of currencies makes kind of some extra money for them. So you won't get it. That's also that kind of the bottom sentence. It's not a currency you will invest in to get rich. There will probably be a bad strategy. So user Libra will not receive a return from that reserve. Which is kind of one of my favorite or most interesting quotes of the paper, which I haven't seen mentioned anywhere. Is this did say, so why do they do this bag of currencies, bag of assets? They say it's similar how other currencies were introduced in the past. I think it's an interesting quote, because if you look at currencies now, they are all not pegged to anything anymore. So maybe that's also a long-term strategy or idea that you say like, oh yeah, it's pegged now, but it doesn't have to be forever. We keep the window a bit open with that kind of formulation. That's my speculations. Don't quote me on that. So what's this Libra association that Visonic also need? It's basically there to further what the Libra coin does and kind of develop it. It's one of its main goals, which is stated, to increase decentralization over time, because on the first kind of start, the Libra is basically just validated by everybody in the Libra association. And they have a goal to develop this coin, and also to get a bit more members. I forgot how much it is to be a member. I think it's 10 million US dollars. Okay, people know. So 10 million US dollars.
10 million and 20 million users.
Oh, you need 20 million users to bring it. So yeah, it's not your small mom and pop store that you want to run these nodes. It also makes sense kind of from a technical point that they only kind of want kind of tech companies that understand what they're doing. But it's still interesting. We get back to that in the opinion section. And what they also said is that they will recruit a managing director. I just saw they already have one now. It's Bertrand Perez. I haven't heard from him yet, but he's kind of the managing director of the association right now. So who is in there? I think that paints an interesting picture on who they kind of selected to be part of the whole association. They have blockchain companies. Maybe I'm naive, but I didn't know that Coinbase was in there, an example. They have e-commerce, so Shopify, I think. They have Visa, MasterCard, Spotify as well. They have payments with Visa, MasterCard. They have social media, of course, with Facebook. Some ride-sharing apps like Uber, telecommunications, music, non-profits. There's a lot of things in there. What are you missing?
Amazon.
It's like the Amazon is interesting, but e-commerce is kind of in there. Banks, yeah. They didn't take a bank. They didn't take a Goldman Sachs or Apple Pay or anything. any banks, at least so far, in that, which is kind of an interesting.
There is a borrowers in there.
Yeah, so they have investment places, true.
So they invested in at least neobanks.
Yeah, and they also, I think they are one of the people that will get the kickback if this Bank of Assets makes money. But yeah, it's not kind of a traditional bank, it's not in the Erste Bank, is not on the list. What is also interesting, I'm not sure if you have followed it or if you have heard the Senate Banking Committee talk about, or with Facebook in the last weeks. There was a hearing 7 days ago because of this kind of foreplay. They basically told Facebook to stop, as soon as they released the paper, they told them to stop developing this whole project. At first, come talk to them. That was done by Maxine Waters, who is a Democrat in the US. They basically said, which I think is very interesting, if it's not properly regulated, this could pose a systemic risk that endangers US and global financial stability, which is kind of a very strong quote. Also, other representatives have chimed in with, it's the biggest thing the community will deal with in this decade. Okay, so they are taking it serious, at least. Question?
The missing point important is the association is in Geneva, Switzerland. And so if you want to shut it down or regulate, like the Swiss authorities are overseeing the Libra Association, so the United States cannot shut it down because they don't have any authority.
That's a good point.
It's in Geneva, Switzerland.
But the Swiss have the regulation about Libra.
Yeah.
Facebook is in the US, right?
So a lot of companies are in
No,
the
the
US.
Calibra company set up.
Yeah, the Facebook.
Yeah, I mean, they could threaten Facebook.
And they are. So they're also not going by the...
Because Calibra is a subsidiary of Facebook.
Yes, it is.
And they run the wallets, so they run all the transactions with that.
It's a new world for the same.
But all these companies are members of the society, and the society is
Maybe they're responsible for
responsible for the members of the society.
There are 100 members.
Yeah.
Facebook is one member of the Libra Association.
Yeah, that's also important.
It's not saying no, it's not.
That's a good point. That's also how they
It's not about Facebook,
yeah.
so it's one of 100 partners.
I agree. So that's also a point they mentioned a lot, that they are just one of many. So they don't have the upper hand. But on the other hand, of course, if the Senate asks, like Facebook is going there, nobody else. David Marcos of Facebook and the Libra Association is there. So yes, they are not directly the people responsible on paper, but people are asking them for questions. Yes?
Forget about the whole association in Switzerland. They run the wallets. They run the wallets and they run the portals on which the wallets are being used. So they don't
blockchain. And everybody has access to the blockchain. You can really don't wallets. They are already produced also.
So we're getting to the blockchain as well, so just keep calm. Let's finish the regulatory part, which I know isn't that interesting. So there was this great Senate hearing. You can listen to it. It's very fun. It was on the 16th of July, so just a week ago. And they had great fun being there, and everybody enjoyed it. So that's David Marcos. He was there to talk to the Senate, and they had some interesting quotes which I wanted to bring on the whole thing. One is the US should absolutely lead the world in rule making for cryptocurrencies. So they really want this to be a US thing, even though yes, they are technically in Geneva, but that's what they officially say to the Senate. Also, Libra will comply with all US regulations. Of course, nobody can say that about Bitcoin in a way. Blockchain technology is inevitable, and the US doesn't lead in building and regulating it. The tech will come from other places, out of reach of national security apparatus. This could be kind of, people have taken this as, oh, Facebook might do it. I might also take it a bit of, oh, don't let Bitcoin run wild. That does do like the blockchain applications. They also mentioned that freezing assets on terrorist organizations, that they could definitely do that. That was kind of how the question was formulated. Of course, this could also mean that people that are not allowed to use Facebook and so on, that they could freeze assets, but they haven't discussed it in the Senate. Okay, that was kind of finish off the first section. Do you want to grab a beer for like 2 minutes? Yeah. 2 minutes. 2 minutes for beer. Don't worry. Now comes either the worst or the most interesting part, depending on your background. So, because there are a lot of papers and not much really out there, I wanted to talk a bit about the technical aspect of this blockchain and kind of go into where they chose for the consensus and so on, how transactions work, a few of the things. It's not super detailed, and if I get something totally wrong, raise your hand, because it's definitely possible. Because there are a lot of papers. So basically what they use for the start is kind of this proof of authority approach, which we already talked about. So basically you have to pay in 20 million and then the association accepts you as one of them and you're allowed to validate transactions. So for anybody who doesn't know or is new to the whole field, basically the two big things in open blockchains are proof of work, which burns energy or some resource to hold people accountable and to hold people honest in the system. And the other idea is proof of stake, which basically says so the one who holds a lot of the asset has bigger incentive to keep the system honest and not screw with it. So they basically have the say in the system. In proof of authority, it's pretty straightforward. Somebody has the authority and tells you, okay, you can participate. We don't care. It's over time though, also they said they want to move to something like proof of stake, especially to be a validator. This could mean that this will become at one point a more open blockchain so that everybody can run a validation node, but this will probably be a few years out. Which doesn't mean though, so which I wanted to clarify, that you can't exceed transactions. So if you want to see which transactions are happening on the network, that's totally possible. Which they also directly say in the paper is, if you run a Libra client, so you want to query the Libra blockchain, you can do that, you can actually download the entire database. The only thing that you can't do is add new transactions or validate that they were done correctly for the time being. So what do they use in the backend? They have a byzantine fault tolerant consensus, like kind of most other blockchains, but they went with a few different takes that they have. I call it the Libra BFT protocol that they use, and it's basically a variant of hot stuff, which is a great name for a paper and the consensus. So that basically means, if you haven't read the paper, which probably nobody has, it's a leader-based system. So one leader on the current state proposes which blocks or which transactions should be added next, while the others basically should accept, hopefully, their block and their proposal. A bit of kind of change that he made is that it's not like an original hot stuff paper where everybody relays transactions across the P2P network, but you basically know who the leader is for the next round and try to send the message directly to them. There are also kind of these three phases. There's a pre-commitment phase, a commit phase, and a decide phase, where this is how they come to a consensus in the network. This whole consensus will work up until a third of the validator nodes are compromised. So if a third of the Libra association, sits in the US and the government forces them to accept a double spend transaction, this would be possible right now if they can convince up to a third of companies. What they mentioned specifically in their paper is similarities to Casper and Tendermint. Casper is famously the proposal to move the proof of stake from Ethereum So they definitely are learning, and they definitely learn a lot of things for the whole papers from Bitcoin, Ethereum, and the other things that are around. What else is there to say to a consensus? They have the same principles. If they have a mempool of transactions where kind of a node picks out which transactions they want to validate next. They didn't even consider proof of work, which is also interesting. They specifically said they didn't think about it, which is kind of strange, because it means they thought about it. Proof of work basically burns energy. It kind of makes sense in their case that they don't want to do something like this, because they will have control anyway of this blockchain in some form. So, and I know it's wasteful. You want to say it's very wasteful?
I'm saying that's a misconception that proof of work is a lottery. In the case of Bitcoin, you have a lottery and every 10 minutes you select a validator. And so that's the whole reason. So this argument that you need to burn energy to select a leader or a validator is completely, it's insane.
Oh, okay, yeah. We can get the opinion at the end.
You use energy.
Yeah, it's still around. It's still around for a reason, most likely. So I don't want to pour about this now.
Maybe the other one is this hot stuff is the fastest wizarding consensus algorithm that currently exists. So that's the fact that has we selected that currently has no state of the art. And the inventor of hot stuff, they hired for Libra. So
yeah, and also the paper was only written like by the end of last year, I think. So it's very new. And that's also what I wanted to point out a bit, that they are they know very well what's going on in the ecosystem. So they really are in with the crowd in that sense at least. They said they modified a few things. Pruning is also possible, just if you're interested. That just means that a node doesn't have to keep all transactions in the future or all records, but not right now. But they made some small changes to hot stuff, which I just want to point out if you want to read the paper. The validators, they kind of sign the result of the state. So before it was the idea that if there are a lot of transactions, you basically see the same transactions and then just sign off on this sequence, which comes after the next. There's also kind of a final signature to make this a bit more secure. Then they have this pacemaker. This is kind of a concept for timeout. So if somebody in the system times out because of the clock difference and so on, they should still be able to participate very fast again. They have chosen, which is kind of interesting, an unpredictable leader election mechanism. That means so the next company that is allowed to add transactions isn't determined after like a sequence. So it could be that like Facebook does all the transactions, statistically very unlikely for a time, but it's possible. And the idea there is that they don't want leaders to get DDoSed and attacked by some outside force. They also aggregate signatures, preserve the identity of the people or the companies that validate the transactions in the backend. So I don't know, people can brag about like validating the second round. Okay, how do transactions work? They are pretty similar to what we know, I think. There's kind of admission control, so they check if the transaction is basically valid. So is there money in the accounts that they can send out? Then it gets into a mempool of transactions. Consensus is built by the Libra association members on a block to create with the transactions in there. The transactions are executed, so also the code in it is executed, and then the whole thing is added to a block. So that's basically what we've known from other blockchain systems. But yeah, it's just want to know that. A bit more in detail, there are also steps. We've already checked if you publish any models. That's important if you talk shortly about the move language. And for the bytecode verification, So they really want to, if you write bad code, basically they want to check it beforehand and throw it out, which is interesting. Yeah, which is interesting. Not much more to say. They also charge gas, which is mentioned at the end. Gas basically is the same concept like in Ethereum. So if you want to execute a big contract or something very complex, you pay more in fees. The fees goes to the Libra association. You basically have to set a gas limit, exactly like in Ethereum, to say like, okay, that's the maximum amount I'm willing to spend. If that's too low, your transaction will break in the middle and basically won't get executed correctly. So they basically have the same concept. They said that this won't be relevant at the beginning because they have enough capacity so far. But if it's getting really clogged, the network, then you will basically have to bid on getting a transaction in a meme pool. This won't be the same problem as with Bitcoin because they of course can have way greater transaction throughput in general, but it's still a spam measurement control. Oh yeah, no, transactions. The transactions is approximately 5 kilobyte of traffic. It requires 40 megabytes of internet. So if you want to run a validator later on, I have some 20 millions to spare. I just need good internet. A commodity CPU should actually be able to do it, and they think with 16 terabyte you should be able to store like the data of 4 billion accounts. So yeah, they are building this to be efficient and kind of on a large scale. 1,000 is still not everything, but it's a good start. And they can also currently scale the networking component, which is based on the P2P, to about 100 validators, so a few hundred. So if they really want to have this open, so everybody can run a validator, it's not impossible right now technically from how they built it. But yeah, maybe in the future. Was there a question to that? Yeah?
For the slide before. The pre-check. Enough money to send. How is it done?
So basically, it's a good question because it works a bit different than in Bitcoin. They basically have a currency model, which is moved bytecode, which we'll talk about, which says how much money is in that account, associated with that account. And this basically just checks if that account that it's associated with has more than the amount you want to send and the gas costs associated. If that's true, then that's kind of the first check cleared. If you don't have any money and create a transaction, which you could, which you also can in Bitcoin, it will say, oh, you failed because you don't have money.
Then there has to be some kind of database where you store the actual sound of sound.
Yeah.
So my question is, so then all the accounts are part of the state, because in an earlier slide you say that the validators can sign the current state and therefore confirm that everything is correct.
Yeah.
So this means that the balances in each of the account is part of the state.
So you transfer each of all accounts and states to all the validators.
Yeah, it's also yeah, exactly. Maybe I should have mentioned it before. It runs kind of similar to Bitcoin in that way, that we know where kind of how the money moves in the system, but it's pseudo-anonymous. So basically, you can make more accounts and kind of send it to those accounts. You can do it without asking anybody. But yeah, Facebook will come at the end with the privacy things. They will know when you sell it probably or when you buy it, definitely. So yeah, that's also kind of a bit to the data structure. Maybe I should have moved it forward. The data structure basically knows the state beforehand and kind of moves the transaction to a state afterwards. There's basically just 3 components: the transaction, the output, and the state. Every state gets a number, so basically every transaction gets a number. That's just a 64-bit integer, and if a validator is out of sync, so if a validator doesn't know all the states yet, he is not allowed to add new transactions. So if a validator falls out of sync with the rest of the network, they will basically have to download the rest, verify it, and then you can add things again. Which is also kind of similar to Bitcoin. Also, the account addresses are similar to Bitcoin. You have a public and a private key, which is called the verification key and the signature key, and then there is the hash of the signature key, which generates your address. So there are other coins nowadays, like Grill, which don't really use addresses, but this does. So you really have a hashed address that looks kind of like a Bitcoin address, where you can send money to, and this is kind of this very similar principle in that case if you know Bitcoin. Then it's just the models. So which is kind of interesting is that everything is a model. So if they create the Libra currency itself, it's based on a module that's executed by their own bytecode. So basically you should be able to copy this like a similar code and create a new currency with the same idea on the whole thing. Currently, the whole model structure is immutable. So if you want to create a new one, you have to just leave the old one behind on the blockchain, and it won't get deleted. This might change in the future, but that's kind of a thing right now. Also, what's interesting is that their core components, which they call them, the core models, they are not metered with gas costs, so they kind of have a base fee if you want to move Libra around, but it doesn't work with the kind of gas principles of Ethereum moving, which is also similar how Ethereum does it in a way. And yeah, there was a question behind there.
Or just adding,
Or
is the Libra version for smart contracts. So
yeah.
is a smart contract.
So a model, exactly. A model is kind of a container for a smart contract.
So the model is just the building contract.
Exactly. I might go through this a bit quicker, just that you know basically what this is. This whole move language will be its own kind of beast, probably. The functionality right now is very limited. But as I've already mentioned, all the functionalities is based on move language. So if you can write move source code, you can basically you could also submit move intermediate representation code, which is kind of a higher level language, which you should be also be able to read and be able to combine to bytecode. And then there's the bytecode, which is the combined version of the move intermediate representation. How to code it? It's basically a bit similar to Rust. So also, if you look at the syntax, it looks very rusty. Bad joke. And it's built up of classes, objects, and methods, which are just called different. There's models, so you can submit a module with your pointer, which has a structure, which is basically an object, and a calls method, which is basically a procedure, which is basically a method. What is kind of interesting, what people might not know yet, is that they said there will be two types of structures. So you can basically say, oh, this is a restricted structure which has very defined properties, like a token, for example. So the idea is, if you want to build a token, it should be very easy and very straightforward, and there should be properties like, or you can't, a transaction can double spend or can create more by itself. So basically you can make a restricted type of structure that only has those properties. The idea there is because they stated that what happened in Ethereum, where there were some big problems with smart contracts that failed and people lost a lot of tokens and money. They want to kind of go against it at the start of having this restricted code option. And there's also the unrestricted one if you don't want to use that. So that's kind of more straightforward maybe, which I should have mentioned earlier. the feature. It's basically pseudonymous like Bitcoin. So I can create a new account, send my Libra from my verified account or from the account where I bought it to this one, maybe shuffle it in between and then send it to Patrick, to mention him again. And Facebook probably wouldn't know. So it's kind of this pseudonymous, similar idea. They don't know who every account belongs to. The gas usage they borrowed from Ethereum, which I already mentioned, because they also have kind of this smart contract language what Ethereum has. A few interesting features that you specifically mentioned, so I also wanted to point them out, is you might be able to rotate the signature key without changing the address. So imagine you're a company and you gave out your private key to 5 members that you trusted once, and then there is the one guy who left the company, and you want to change the signing key, then this might be possible without changing the address. So if somebody already knows your address, you don't have to change that. They can still send money to the same address, but you in the backend can invalidate the signing key and get a new one, which could be interesting. What they also very much think about, which is a whole another topic which we can talk about forever, is identity management. So they really want to be an identity management idea or have it integrated there. Which of course, if you think about Facebook, it's basically already what it is to a big extent. And now they want to bring it to the blockchain solution, which probably makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you want to transact with an entity, you don't want again to give your name, to give your address and everything. It might be practical, but it's also a bit controversial, especially with Facebook backing the whole project. And in the future, they want to have proof of stake voting. It's interesting, so they basically want to be a government, but they want to have democracy in that if a Libra Association member owns more Libra coin, they have more voting power. This should happen on-chain. So they really are mentioned that they want to have on-chain voting, which means if you have more coins, you have more voting power. It seems like a very oligarchic principle. Then you have, which is also what Ethereum kind of wants to go for, this rent system for storage. Right now, if you put a model on there, we basically stay on there forever. But in the future, they want to charge you if this gets out of hand. Where you basically pay gas until the expiration time is hit, where you didn't pay enough gas anymore, and then it gets destroyed and deleted. And yeah, proof of stake and stake slashing is coming. They mentioned it, they said it in italic, that you see it in the paper. Which also points again to, oh, it's probably not a good idea if a non-tech company runs a node, because they could lose their money if they really screw up. They should know what they are doing. Or stake slashing means you fall out of sync, your node goes offline, or kind of goes against the network, then you will lose part of the coins you have put there. So they can actually lose money if they don't help the network. And yeah, that will come. Okay, quick last break before we go to opinions. You want a break? No?
No.
No? There's no? Okay, then let's continue. We can make a break between test nights if you want. Yeah? Questions? Yeah, let's go to questions.
The rent system, and how would you pay for the gas, and what does the rent system mean, and how do you
So basically right now, the idea is that all of this code that you publish will be on the blockchain forever. But if you think this is going to be a huge, yeah, it's no problem. Some people want to get it here. Feel free. But in the future, they say if you kind of spam the network, or if they just have terabytes of petabytes of data lying around, then they will start charging you. So if you write a bigger contract, you will pay more fee. For example, you say, I'll pay for 5 years to have this contract, and after 5 years, you either pay again, or they start deleting it. And say, we don't want to keep that code around.
So do have a smart contract, so for instance, I would need to pay for it to...
No, it's to delete the smart contracts. It's because they have to store it, right? Yeah, they have to store it on their storage devices somewhere. And so they don't have to keep us a contract for 50 years that you don't use anymore.
Okay.
They just say like, hey, pay us 5 cents or it's gone.
So all the transactions are transparent, so there is no sort of hiding.
No, so there's no direct obfuscation. I'm curious actually if we could build something that shuffles coins around and so on. That could be possible. So to make it a bit more anonymous, but in the end, Facebook will control probably everything that.
So at the end, in the way, the transaction between every party included.
No, so exactly, they don't know what all the transactions are doing, but they definitely will know when you probably pay for something, they will definitely know when you buy it, they will definitely know when you sell it to like their kind of store things. But yes, if we kind of exchange goods and services, if it's for Facebook, they won't know what we exchanged at what rate, or if I just send the money to myself.
Yeah, but it's obvious that all the addresses are
No, it's easier to de-anonymize if the accounts are fixed. Or
But
maybe
not,
even tied to your Facebook profile.
Yeah, the next one is everything will be tied because normally you will have to show your ID or something so they know your address.
So you don't have, if you create a new address, you can do that freely. So you don't have to give your Facebook account and associate every address with your account, right?
We will see.
What Glossary cannot be anonymous because they have to KYC. Otherwise,
they have to KYC in and out.
Otherwise, too close to.
But if we transact in Libra in between, they don't have to know what we transact in. But they probably want to know. So.
Yeah, it's just speculation.
Yeah, that's speculation. That's fair. Yeah. We're already getting into opinions. Yeah.
So Facebook was the sponsor of the project. Has now a special role they can
No, they specifically said they don't. I mean, they also said that in front of the Senate, and they said that going everywhere. So, of course, they still have kind of a role in that they get called for those things. But in the Libra Association, they are just one of 100. And their validator does exactly the same as everybody else.
They have the same intention like all the other members?
Yeah, that's,
There's
yes.
one member that has a special role. If you go to the registered address of the Libra Association Switzerland, you will find no signs of Libra, you will just find signs of PayPal. So there is no physical manifestation of like the Libra offices. It's just PayPal has like an output. And David Marcus was president of PayPal for 10 years or so, and he I guess his personal pet project carries over between companies.
I mean, the PayPal relationship is anyway interesting because Elon Musk and the people that founded PayPal mentioned that they wanted to create the currency. That was kind of the original intention, but they failed, and so they created PayPal. But now they're back. And Elon Musk and a bunch of them. Elon Musk was, I mean, he's closer to creating PayPal than I am. Yeah. Because he sold his company to them. Yeah, true. They got bought, yeah. Sure. But he had shares. I don't.
So who is making decisions for where the road is going further?
Oh, that's a good question. The Libra Association should do that in a kind of conglomerate fashion, so they probably sit together.
For further development?
Right now, a lot of it came from Facebook actually, or from Facebook. They put a lot of money in that. In the future, they want to have it paid by fees and by this basket of assets. So basically, if you give the money, they make the interest on the money and finance the whole thing. But right now, the money comes from the 10 millions that everybody paid in.
So that money is locked up for further development, or are there different pools?
I actually don't know that. But if anybody wants to chime in, like...
No, the money is a reserve. The money you put in, that's the
Yeah, but right now the pre-development was the question.
But after the next development stage,
So I think the current plan was paid by Google or Facebook. Yeah, Facebook is paid.
They are paying everything? because they're
Sugar daddy.
to get it started. But they know French products or
What?
no. Who is paying tells you what to do. No, it's like who pays Satoshi. Let's say here, the code is free. You know? It's not a non-step blockchain, you can create your database and so on. So they are committed to get it all started, you know, because you need money. You know? If you do a hodl, you know, and make you getting rich, you know, who is investing? You know? You have to pay. So they are kind of.
It's basically also what we just said. Yeah. Last question.
Like in terms of the reserve, like who gets to decide what kind of mix that would be? Like,
yeah, that's also a good question.
Would be pegged against because it does make have a huge impact. Like what kind of bonds you buy. Like.
Well,
it will have a huge impact.
So they have four currency. They have the US dollar, the euro, and then they have the British pound, and they have the yen.
Yeah, but you have treasury notes. Treasury notes.
They don't want to put the cash, you know, the idea is they take the cash, and the cash doesn't give you any interest. So what they do basically is they take the cash in euro and put it in euro bond. They take the
because it doesn't answer my question, like how is the money being invested? What's split between pounds and euros and whatever they would buy for? Like
I think it's
very easy. You know, if you buy, that's the difference between if you buy a Libra, if you buy a Libra in euro, then the euro gets put in. You know? If you buy your Libra in dollar, your dollar gets put in.
No, it's not like that. No, it's not like that. They actually buy governmental bonds with your euro. So that's also the point. You won't get back €1. You will get back what this governmental kind of bond package is still worth for that point.
You won't get back anything. Only authorized participants, special like onboarding institutions, like payments institutions, maybe Bitbundle can apply to become one of them. I don't know.
But you have to
have like a money transmitter license, and then you can do this basket redemption.
Yes.
As individuals, you do not directly have a claim for redemption, but the authorized resellers do have a claim. So it is a claim on money, and as Oliver Völkel recently explained, this makes it e-money under European law.
Yeah, so the whole regulation thing will be like, it's still not done. And also in the whole white paper, they basically stated that they want to launch this by the mid of next year, and I don't think this is going to happen.
But you should not mess up Libra Goldcoin.
Okay, what?
Goldcoin is the token for the investors.
Okay.
That brings the returns on the.
Okay, that's what they have. It just stated in the white paper that they will get a return, not how.
This is only voucher,
okay. So it's basically the Federal Reserve money.
I think that's the success story of Libra. Bitcoin is a filter, because everybody wants to get rich. And so Libra is just a stable coin.
Okay.
The money you put in, that's the reserve, and there's no way to get rich.
Let's continue with the presentation.
I know that there's still a bunch of questions, but we can definitely answer them.
Libra is not going to make Facebook rich. They make money.
Yeah, to add to that, they specifically say they think that online payments will go up because of this, and that's how they will do it.
Who will develop the wallet? I mean, the wallet will be in Facebook or in WhatsApp?
Yeah, no, by the Libra Association. You can also participate. I think it's on Meetup. So there's actually already open source front ends that you can try out, which we'll do at the end.
So
can we do the questions later? Sorry, because I think we will never get to the end.
just one short. Is it? Does anybody need some sort of Facebook to participate, or is it?
No,
not connected?
no, it should not be connected.
I don't know about this gold coin.
Also, don't. Let's discuss this
later, please.
I just wanted to give you so the Bitcoiners' opinions, because they have been very diverse. Like with all other coins, you basically have heard like that's all crap, that's all the shitcoin. In this case, opinions are kind of diverse, and I think that's interesting because they don't align like in a lot of other cases. People have stated that it brings attention to Bitcoin, and that's a good thing. So while a lot of people have seen the hype, and it kind of fell out, now it's over. Again, we're coming to this phase where crypto is being talked about, and with crypto, Bitcoin is of course bigly associated, so also startups for Bitcoin are going up. It has to have some restrictions. Bitcoin still doesn't have restrictions in that sense that you can keep anybody from spending it. For example, the US has heavy sanctions on Iran and on people from Iran. So there will be the question if those people will be allowed to transact in Libra, or if the US government will immediately say that's totally impossible. So there Bitcoin has an edge and is not a direct competitor anyway. That's what some people see. Also, it's kind of free education. I mean, it uses similar cryptography. It uses similar ideas that you have to keep your keys safe, which is very important anyway. Also in the Senate, they mentioned that that could totally lead that people are getting scammed out of their Libra, and in the Facebook basically said, yeah, that could happen. So it will very much still trigger this idea of personal responsibility with your keys and with your money. And that's also important for Bitcoin usage in the future. It's also a stable coin, so if you want to move money between exchanges, maybe you want to do that via Libra. Yeah?
Nobody can assure you that this is a stable coin. From simple econometrics, it cannot be stable.
Totally fair. If I move it for 10 seconds from one exchange to another, it will be totally fine. With EOS, I'm not sure how much we will. Also, kind of that's kind of the next point which I want to write out. But it competes against competition. I know it sounds weird, but there are a lot of blockchain projects right now that are not really decentralized, and this kind of professionalizes this whole market. So then that might be controversial, but then that's the question. Okay, EOS, does it still make sense? Like if there are a few exchanges that kind of validate EOS transactions, that's nice, but there is a huge conglomerate of huge companies that validate those transactions on a way more professional scale. Is there then even a point for those kind of currencies that are not totally decentralized? Also, what is very interesting, there are some famous libertarians in the scene, like Eric Voorhees, and they are very much trimmed on the idea. So, the Senate committee hates this coin idea, then I love them, because the enemy of state power is kind of my friend. Which is of course a dangerous mantra, but some people see that as very positive, that it's kind of, that they are on this side of the debate. But they're also too far in my opinion. And it can also be, and that we already know we disagree, safe haven against some fiat politics. So on the negative side, what could it do for the Bitcoin ecosystem? It takes some legal activity maybe away from Bitcoin. So if you want to just buy a beer with Bitcoin and then you pay 10 cents, and it takes too much time, I don't really shake your head, and it's too complicated. This will probably make it easier, let's be honest. Like they can make it easier and faster. Doesn't mean better because they control a lot, but they can make it easier. It also might attract negative regulatory attention towards Bitcoin. I made this beautiful meme for that, which took me way too much time, that's why I did that slide design. Where they basically go like, hey, we want to have regulations for this whole space, regulate us, tell us what to do. While kind of Bitcoin and governments has had this kind of very slow approach to regulations, and this will definitely accelerate the whole mantra. It is also not decentralized, so if that's really the global coin we will have in the end, there's still always the option for governments to say, tell them what to do, of course, because we know that there are 100 companies that have to follow the law. And spending surveillance will be easier definitely than the privacy coins, but also than Bitcoin. And also in general it will be easier because your bank account is in a way not seeable for a lot of people, but this might be, like the Bitcoin. So, personal opinion, you're going to hate it. I think that this is not just a game. So while a lot of people take it serious in the US, I also think we should take it serious. I think this can have a lot of impact. I mean, we now have a world where you don't only have Bitcoin, which is still this kind of fun underground idea, and like government currencies. Now you have corporations that say, oh, we also want to have a currency. We also want to have the same thing. And to be honest, they still have a lot of power, and maybe Bitcoin isn't there yet, at least not on this scale. Also this peg, which I mentioned before, this doesn't have to be forever. What if they're big enough that their currency is more accepted than other state currencies that are just have value for some reason? They could basically play the same thing and go like, oh, we don't need to peg it to anything anymore. You will use it anyway in the future. That's definitely a possibility. Also, corporations will get new powers. I mean, think of small governments that have currencies that are not worth as much. Then Facebook kind of acts like an IMF that says, hey, we'll cut off your people or your economy from Libra, which could have huge impacts because there are more and more of the economy is moving digital, and this is kind of a power move that could make it possible for corporations to pressure governments directly. Similar to what the IMF does basically to governments. And I'm also certain that a competition will come. I think Facebook did the smart move of being very early. And maybe Google joins the Libra Association, we don't know, maybe they will launch their own project at one point. But I think it's even more likely that we see WeChat coin and like Chinese government coin coming, so which also kind of makes, again, a Bitcoin case maybe, because if you have this global competition and it's only splitting the world into two, then you have something to connect them in free currencies. So it's all about power. And that's kind of my last slide, which I already kind of mentioned. Now you have those kind of free players that play against each other. You have kind of unrestricted currencies or like public blockchains. You have governmental currencies and corporate currencies. In short term, it's a three-way match. So it's very interesting that Libra kind of which rhetoric they choose. To the government, they basically say, oh, you don't want to let China or Bitcoin win this game. To Bitcoiners to say like, oh, we are also against the government. I think it kind of looks like this. Everybody is playing a bit against everybody. And we will also see this in the innovation speed department. I mean, the governments move very slow, but I think it's not a big surprise to anybody. But Bitcoin also doesn't move the fastest ever. Because it's kind of a harder engineering challenge. But corporate coins will move very fast. So we already saw, or we just talked about, like, oh, when was the white paper launch? It was in June. Now they already had the Senate committee meeting, and like the coin is getting more developed. They have 4 white papers. I mean, like, it's scary, but it's also kind of impressive how much they can achieve in a very fast time. And because they have a lot of control over their currency, which nobody does over Bitcoin, they can make very fast decisions. So, and this will happen. So they will definitely be the fast innovator, maybe even in the field. Now they have learned from us, and maybe they will also give us something back. Maybe there are some innovations that will come from that Bitcoin can adapt in the future. I think that's possible, but we don't know. And right now it's a three-way struggle. Okay, with that positive note at the end, we could do the transactions now. So to make 1 or 2 testnet transactions, it's very rough move. Also, there was this wallet. What was the website?
There is a front end created for the wallet.
You can also check that out.
We have some energy left. Let's take a look how Libra looks in practice. I had the pleasure of trying it out last week already on some of my experimental nodes. And it turns out that there are actually a lot of very well developed and much better working tools out there than I expected. So they really took a lot of time in preparation before releasing this open source stack. And I think it's really important to distinguish between everything we see as the open source things, and then is the Libra protocol and the tools, and then there may be closed source, but definitely corporate run products like the Calibra wallet. So all the regulatory aspects, they pile upon the Calibra part, and let's say open source or flexible or smart contract sites, they pile onto the Libra part. I'm not exactly sure why they chose this name. Personally, I think it's a kind of sarcastic, considering the potential limitations you have on the liberty side of this blockchain, but nevertheless, from a technical perspective, it's really important to check it out, I think. So when you first start up the Libra client, you get this little console. I don't think you can see it. I will change my resolution here. Just a second. I will change this to something really low that we can have this.
And black on white.
Huh?
Black on white if possible.
Okay. Let's try this one.
Can we just end this slide?
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that's the way it is.
I think the left one.
Damn it. Bit better.
Den Beamer gleich wieder einschalten, sonst überhitzt die Lampe.
sorry. Going on? Okay, so just do an introduction. So the first problem that you encounter when you try to do something with the Libra client is you get a command prompt, which doesn't really tell you a lot, and especially you don't know how to quit. So if you want to get out of Libra, you have to do it the same way as Vim, Q exclamation mark. Okay.
Ist der Beamer wieder eingeschalten?
Ja, es blinkt. Also es
okay, and
okay, dann es hat am Anfang auch ein bisschen gedauert. Oh, now it's coming.
It's coming.
Optimal.
Good. Okay, yes, I'll put this up slightly to the top, so you can see it a bit better. So after you install these tools, the scripts are quite smart, so they do this kind of automatically. You get a directory with about 7 gigabytes of data, mostly program data in it, and you can start up the start CLI testnet. So it picks up a host. I believe it's mostly just like a terminal front end to that specific host to get information about the blockchain. But you have some options already. So what you can do is you can create accounts on this testnet, so it's automatically connected to the testnet. So you can create accounts using commands like account create, AC, enter, and it just created an account 0, and it has a public address. So because I tried it out before, I can take this address and I can.
There's a little part on the next line.
Huh?
Next line.
Ah, yeah. Yeah, that's right. I need both lines. That's all right. So take this, and I should be able to. Oops. Okay. I should be able to search for this account on this public Libra testnet explorer. I think that somebody who doesn't actually have
all intimate information can already build this, so I suspect that this website is actually not operated by Facebook. But I can see all the details for this account. So I booted it up before, and I did only very little stuff with it. So we will repeat these steps now. So I have one account here, and I will create another one here, and a third one here. So I have now 3 accounts. They all have a public address. And this third account, I think it's completely empty. This has no information in it whatsoever. Let's check this out if this is true. Oh, okay, yeah, it seems this is basically not working yet. So, because I never did anything with that account. So, this is, wasn't really expected, but I can already say account or query, and then I can use this program to query the balance of account 0. So QB0 gives me the balance of account 0. It says 1,901 Libra. And this is of course tested Libra, it's not worth anything. And why is it not worth anything? Because I can simply say account mint, account number 0 shall get now 10,000 more coins. And it's submitted. I can do the same query again. Account, query, and I have 11,901. And this, of course, triggered some actions. What is interesting, okay, so what is interesting, I will try to transfer money to account number 2. Account,
transfer
TB, I will do a blocking transfer from 0 to 2 for the amount of 999. And, okay, and I can query the transaction status, QTS01, fetch events true, and I can get all the information about the recent transfer that I just did. So this is this piece of information. It tells me, okay, I did a transaction, there was a sender, so it basically gives me all the usual blockchain semantics for a account-based transfer. So the question, is it more like Bitcoin or is it more like Ethereum? It's clearly much more like Ethereum because it does account-based accounting and stores the amount of coins in the state tree for each specific account. It does have some events that were thrown, and I should now be able to go to this web page, hopefully, and see, it worked. This new account that I just created has this single transaction associated with it. And here I can also go to this TX ID. And the TX ID is not as in Ethereum or Bitcoin, it's not a client-side TX ID, it's actually a globally ordered total transaction number. So we now know that in the testnet we already had 316,379 transactions exactly, and this is my transaction ID. So I don't know the transaction ID beforehand, before I'm broadcasting it. So I can look at the details, and it says I have 999 Libra transferred. There was 0 gas used. As you said, there are some exceptions for how gas is consumed, but the transaction actually specified a maximum gas. So yeah, it was allowed to spend gas, but it didn't actually spend gas. This is also where we differentiate between the pre-phase and the main phase and the post-phase. So this is checked in the pre-phase. And of course there's a digital signature associated. As far as I know, it uses exactly also the Bitcoin curve, SECP 256K1. And also, it's one piece of information that's very important. It uses exactly the same backup phrase mechanisms as any other crypto coin. So it's also doing this. So let's check this out, how I can do a backup. I can go ahead and use account write to path demo export.txt. Okay, so I wrote a backup file to disk. Let's check it out. Okay, so I'm checking this out. Home, Libra. How did I say? Demo? Yeah, demo export.txt. So this was the interesting part. Oops. Yeah, so this was the interesting part. I exported my seed, my private seed, and if you are familiar with Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency where you hold your private keys, this is exactly the same format. So I believe if this is still true when there is a Libra release, we will have a lot more cryptographic literacy out there simply because people will know how to use these kind of primitives. But what's also important is maybe they will shield the UX in such a way that some of the people will not directly interact with this stuff, because what is super interesting, I think, about the whole thing is if you look at the Libra repository, so this is a mono repository where everything regarding Libra seems to be being committed. There is no, I mean, you find everything on GitHub/Libra, I think. Maybe there are others, but I haven't seen them. When you go to where is there the most activity, it's actually here in NextGain Crypto, where there is a lot of stuff surrounding threshold signatures, for example, with BLS signatures. So what I suspect what will happen in the release that's coming out is that there will be some sort of semi-custodial scheme where users hold parts of their key, and then there might be some sort of distributed recovery service, maybe based on your social graph, maybe based on like a notary service or Facebook as an entity. I don't know yet what the scheme exactly will be, but this seems to be where a lot of activity is happening with BLS signatures, some of the new curves being used and so on. So this is not fully fleshed out yet. So what else can we do here? So we can transfer money between accounts. I think we send money to one more account. We can also basically crawl the whole blockchain. This is really easy. Let's just pull up the help. So I can do a query for an account transaction account sequence. So it's query TS. And then which transaction do I want to look at? So I can start off at, I don't know, transaction 0. That was maybe the first transaction that ever happened. Oh no, that's not the TX range, sorry. TR. I want to start with block 0, or this transaction 0. I want to get only one of them, but I could also write 100. And then fetch events. Let's keep it shorter. I will see false. So the output is a bit smaller. So this was the very first transaction in the whole network. And then I can go ahead and query all the transactions if I want to write a program like a block explorer, like this one. I could use this command line tool in the back end of my system, or I could script this block explorer to use these transaction queries to, for example, parse all this data. So I'm now getting the first 100 transactions of the system. So it's already not very, it's very transparent. Everybody knows what is going on, but it also gives us a lot of flexibility to build tools on top of that transparent stack that are maybe not as transparent, or where the rules are not as clear. So some of the rules that are also here not clear to me is, I am submitting transactions to an authority group, and what kind of rules does this authority group have? Do they have secret dealings where if my IP is from Iran, for example, that they would blacklist me? I don't know, really, I have no idea. If somebody reports me to authorities, will they block my transaction from propagating? I don't know. But interestingly, the tools that are available on this free part of the stack are quite flexible, and theoretically I think would allow me to write tools like funds held by smart contracts, mixing of coins, threshold signatures where there are groups of people signing for transactions. These are theoretically possible, but I don't know if they will be kind of allowed on the system, and I guess the best way to find it out is to build those tools or to take the tools from other chains and try to apply them to this chain. So this would be a very interesting. I think this is the best use of the time before the network launches, to have those tools in place to just set the standard of reality.
Yeah, so my question is, this is like the basic transactions where I don't have smart contracts.
Yeah, exactly.
But can you already upload something that was coded in Move?
It is possible.
It is possible, okay.
But I haven't done it yet, so
okay.
I'm not that deep into this yet, and
yeah.
I'm not getting paid for it right now, so so I don't know if I will have time.
I mean, is this command line tool even useful for this, or?
I think it is.
Okay.
You can do like raw transaction stuff here as well. So what's the output of the compiler tool is actually a binary code that you could pipe into this tool. So you could pipe it somehow together, but I'm not sure. I haven't tried it out. I'm pretty sure we will find out. And also, I haven't seen any reports of people successfully compiling their own non-standard smart contracts to this intermediate language and bytecode yet. But I guess it should be possible.
Yeah.
I think it's possible, but the important part is like you have to run your own private Libra blockchain, so that the official Libra blockchain will only support its own built-in contracts and doesn't accept any.
Not sure about
that's the question.
That's so in the Move white paper they stated otherwise.
And if you want to run your own contracts, in the future it might be possible, but now you have to run your own private blockchain, and you can run it on Amazon service or whatever.
Yeah.
Testing, but for now you have to run, and the code, it's easy to set up already, but you cannot run your own contracts.
Yeah, I'm not sure. So in the Move white paper they stated otherwise. So they said in the Move white paper you can do this, but if it's possible on the testnet right now, I don't know exactly.
No, it's not possible.
It's not possible. You think it's not possible?
It's theoretically possible, but they found out because of security reason they do not offer contracts. Only they use the contracts, the transfer.
Yeah.
And so. But if you want to test writing your own contracts, then it's possible with Libra blockchain, but you have to run your own private blockchain network, which is not hard to do.
Okay, so guess maybe somebody will fork it and make it
actually. There are already examples.
Okay.
Where they have their own tokens and stuff.
Yeah. So in the Move language, they make it quite easy to build your own token system inside a Libra-like blockchain. I'm not sure, I don't know all the details if it's possible to run it now or in the future. We will see. I think you have some more information on that. And I think you also are doing a workshop on this tomorrow or something. Is that right? A learning group, yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. So maybe there is an opportunity to find out more. So yeah, so that's the basics of the demo. So we minted some coins, we transferred some coins, we queried the balances, we saw how we can extract all the information from the blockchain. I think that's like maybe 70 or 80% of what you can do right now with this tool. So you could build something on top of it, but it's definitely not easy at the moment. Yeah, so if there are some technical questions on that or some other discussion points, or then let's move on to this.
No, so yeah, from my side, I think this part is over. I think, yeah, probably some people still have questions, so we are still here. I already grabbed my beer. We should do the same. And we can discuss on what just happened if you didn't understand something.